Right. Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here, although very upset that I have to follow JC. I don't know how I'm gonna live up to that. But interestingly enough, a lot of what he was talking about of the trends of the future are exactly the types of things that I'm helping to nurture and support out of the Harvard Innovation Lab. So when you think about the innovators of the future and the students that are at school today, not just at Harvard, but all universities, it's how do you unpack and how do you unlock and how do you help realize the potential of their ideas. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. What happened? As I'm talking. It's funny because I usually spend a lot of time when I'm talking to academics and educators and governments and policymakers trying to convince them why innovation is important. But I won't spend a lot of time on that here because I'm preaching to the choir. Obviously, this is an innovation conference. And as we know, and as all of you know, that innovation is crucial to the development of people as individuals, as a society, and the world obviously needs innovation to continue. And I think I'd argue it's more important than ever at a point in time in history. And then that begs the question, why Harvard? Why is innovation important at Harvard? And I'm still trying to convince many of the powers that be at Harvard that it is important. It is a very traditional institution that's been doing what it does for a very long time. And Harvard, I think we don't have to argue that has been creating the future leaders of the world for a very long time. They've been creating the CEOs and the heads of investment banks, et cetera, et cetera. And it's my notion that that's not what Harvard needs to do in the future. Harvard needs to create this next generation of innovators, the people that are going to change the world. And as we all know, so many of the companies, the most powerful, the wealthiest companies in the world today didn't even exist 10 years ago. And I would argue that's going to keep happening. So we have to help position them and help nurture them so that we can continue to create the next generation of innovators. The mission is quite simple, and it's funny because when we started 6 years ago as this university-wide experiment, we've stayed very true to this mission that helping students put their ideas to use. Again, Harvard knows how to teach people how to think. They've been doing it for hundreds of years. I won't mess with that curriculum. It's not my job to. But how do we sit alongside that academic curriculum and complement it and give students the ability to take those ideas that they're learning in the classroom and put them to use in a constructive way? So that's what we do. And then the other notion is that Harvard is a very, I don't know how many of you have been to the Harvard campus and know that Harvard has 13 different schools and that there's possibilities everywhere, but because no one talks to each other across disciplines, across schools, across academic areas, there's so much unrealized value and so many missed opportunities. So what we've created at the iLab is this idea of One Harvard, this umbrella around innovation and entrepreneurship to bring students from across all these separate siloed schools where they're just learning in one individual academic discipline, which, as you know, as innovators, is the exact opposite of what needs to happen. That bringing together every student from every school and allowing them to come together around a shared passion and sharing their diverse ideas. And I would say this, if there's secret sauce to what we do, and so many other university-based innovation centers come to us and try to learn about our methodology and what we're doing, and I say this is it. It's this cross-disciplinary approach. And I'm sure a lot of those, I wasn't here yesterday, but over dinner I heard from a lot of people that were talking within their companies that that's exactly what they're trying to instill. That if you can bring together people from different backgrounds, skills, experiences, expertise, and allow them to collaborate around that shared passion, that solutions to some of the world's biggest problems can be had, and that those solutions are going to come outside of that individual discipline. And we have hundreds of examples of ventures that were formed that say that they never would have even created this venture or come up with this application for technology had they not been coming at it from very different points of view. So our job is really simple. How do we connect the people, the ideas, and the resources to have an impact on the world. And I say an impact on the world because my job is not just to create entrepreneurs. I don't want to turn every Harvard student into an entrepreneur, but innovator is the operative term. We're called the Harvard Innovation Lab, not the Harvard Entrepreneurship Lab, because we want to make sure that no matter where they go, if they go to innovate within the context of a large corporation, whatever it is, that we want them to think creatively and think outside of the box. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've developed over time is what we call the 3 principles of innovation, which is not that different from a lot of Tom's recollections and summaries from yesterday. And then the what do we do, and obviously the why. So first, these 3 principles are, how do we create a place where we have the ability for ideas to grow, creating the people, not creating the people, but giving people the ability to have the passion and the empathy to come up with these ideas, and then connection, and again, connecting those people in a cross-disciplinary way. So the first one, in order for those ideas to grow, it's imperative that we create a safe and transparent community. People come and tour our space, and we have really wonderful space, and they bring their architects, and I say, you're looking at this from the complete opposite point of view. It's really about the community. It's really about how you create the conditions by which these ideas can be generated. And so how do we do that? The first thing, I'll just give you all of them at once. The first thing is, we call it an IP-free zone. So every idea belongs to their owners. Harvard does not stake claim to anything. That allows me to be completely aligned with the entrepreneurs and making sure that everybody's motivation is aligned and there's no ulterior motives. The other thing, and I think I heard a lot of talk about failing safely, failing fast, is incredibly important to the process. There's not a lot of places at Harvard where there's no consequences for failure. And these students that come to Harvard are really not accustomed to failure. And we have to teach them how to fail often, how to fail fast, and how to use failure to help them continue with what they're trying to do. Not an easy task with Harvard students. So we create many different conditions to allow that to happen and allow them to practice it. The next thing, I always try to put in examples of students. If I could have my entire presentation talking about all of the great students and their ideas, I would do that. And oftentimes when I talk, I bring up a panel of students to do most of the talking because their stories are so much more profound and exciting than what I can say. So here's an example of a student who found success in this very safe environment where her idea was allowed to be brought to fruition. So she was an undergrad at the college. She had worked with homeless people. She had come to Harvard to save the world, never imagined herself as an entrepreneur. She's now the founder of a company called Art Lifting, which helps homeless people bring their art to the market so that they can sell their art and no longer be homeless. Her idea came out of this personal passion. How do you solve a problem in the world? Because she wasn't looking at it from the lens of how do I start a company? How do I make money? What's my business model? And she was allowed to kind of create her idea organically and authentically. She then graduated from Harvard and became a co-founder of a company and an entrepreneur that really is having a true impact on the world. Those are the types of things that happen that I would argue would never have been able to happen if you didn't have that safe, transparent environment. The second principle is this idea of the community having empathy and passion for the process and the ideas. And when I say community, it's the entrepreneurs themselves, but it's also the contributors. It's the mentors and the advisors and all the folks that help and advise these companies, making sure that they have an empathy to listen and give positive feedback. So how do we do that? Again, it's this idea of compassion. It's this idea of cross-pollination of ideas, making sure that there's peer-to-peer learning, that they're all in this open environment. They're not just working out for themselves. There's collaboration, again, for the contributors as well as the entrepreneurs themselves. And then something that's often overlooked that is incredibly important is this idea of collective celebration. We have these gongs in all of our labs. And some people think it's silly, and what does that have to do with innovation? But this idea that when a student reaches a milestone, they bang the gong, and the entire community gets up and celebrates with them with these milestones. And the milestones are not always funding, which people always associate with entrepreneurial endeavors. It can be a first customer. It can be an aha moment. It can be, lots and lots of different things that celebrate the milestones along the way. And having been a struggling entrepreneur and never had a place like the iLab, those inspiring, small inspiring moments help them continue. It can be a very, very lonely place otherwise. And another example that I like to throw in, this is a technology company that came out of a personal passion, talking about that empathy and passion. One of our founders' father fell off a ladder, couldn't call 911 from his cell phone, almost died. He's now reimagining emergency response to allow you to reach first responders from your mobile phone anywhere in the world. Again, the idea came out of this personal passion. He was allowed to further his idea at the iLab, not again from a business model standpoint, but how do I solve a particular problem in the world? The third principle is that the idea of connections, and we talked about those cross-disciplinary connections, have to be constant and active. And how do we do that? We do that through broad programming. No matter where you are, we call it top of funnel, making sure there's entry points for students no matter where they are, what stage of the journey they're on. We have community facilitators whose job it is to make those connections happen. It's an incredibly inefficient process. We'd love to figure out a way to use technology to help those connections occur. But right now, we do the best that we can, making sure that opportunities for connection happen. And then what we call structured serendipity. We create our events to make sure that those connections can happen. We want them to happen in an authentic, organic way, but we want to make sure that we optimize and we maximize the opportunity for that. So whether that's color-coded name tags around your passion and your interest, or areas of the room that we set up when we have hundreds of people coming together for different events, making sure that we try to create those opportunities for serendipity to the space itself, the soft spaces, the kitchen, making sure that the navigational experience as you're coming through the iLab optimizes that serendipity. And here's another example of a company that's going to change the world that came together actually in a commercializing science class. It was a student from the Kennedy School of Government, the law school, the business school, and a PhD in chemistry. And they were doing a class project. They had this silk-based protein technology that they were playing with. And they were trying to come up with market applications. The original application were scarves for developing countries. This silk-based protein was really durable, and they could create scarves that would last for years and years. They're now actually shipping vaccines to developing countries using the silk-based proteins to stabilize those vaccines. Again, very different from scarves. And they say in their founding story that they never would have come up with this idea had they not been coming at the problem from very different points of view, backgrounds, experiences, et cetera. So that's just one example. It came out of a class, and what we like to do is make a seamless transition from a class project, which typically would disband at the end of the semester, nothing would come of it, giving them the opportunity to then turn that into a venture. So I talked a little bit about the principles of innovation. Now I'm just going to get into the nitty-gritty of what we do. So having been an entrepreneur myself, I like to use a rapid prototyping approach, creating an MVP, getting customer feedback, and iterating on that idea. So we opened up literally as a university-wide experiment. We talked about if we build it, will they come? I had no idea when we opened our doors. I had so many people tell me that this is career suicide. Harvard doesn't know anything about innovation. I don't know why you're doing this. I would not touch that job with a 10-foot pole. having, liking a challenge, kind of made me want the job a little bit more to prove everyone wrong. But truly, we have no idea what's going to happen. We opened up our doors in 2011. We track very closely what schools the students are coming from. And I'm so proud to say, and this is, I'm not tooting my own horn because it happened on its own, all 13 schools were represented literally from the day we opened our doors. So there was demand, there was this interest, there was this passion to come together in this cross-disciplinary way. Grew dramatically, I think, much faster, much larger than anyone ever imagined, which is incredible. The Launch Lab is our alumni co-working space, which I'll talk about in a few more minutes, but what happened was we're just serving students. Those students would graduate. How do we continue to support them beyond graduation? That was a pain point for me, not wanting to kick them out when they're going to do this full time. And then our latest endeavor, which I'll also talk about, is a life sciences facility, because that was another pain point where our life science ventures could not get off the ground because they didn't have the ability to replicate their experiments. But at the core of everything we do is this notion of shared resources. So this community and connection across those 3 labs. We've created advisors and mentors and subject matter experts and funders and lawyers and all of the different components of what you need. And all of the programming wrapped around that. So the students, again, can plug in whatever stage of their journey on. They don't have to have an idea. They don't have to have a team. They can enter and start learning as whatever place they're at. And we have a big sign, further, faster. If we had a tagline, this would probably be it. The idea is through the shared resources to help the students, the individuals, and the ideas, nurture them so they get further faster. Again, if that means fail faster, that's perfect. We want that to happen so they can get on, iterate on their ideas and go on to the next thing. So the first lab that opened was the Innovation Lab. I'll talk about that first, and then I'll talk about the Launch Lab and the Life Lab. So the Harvard Innovation Lab, it sits on the edge of campus. Again, part of the people that told me this was career suicide also said it would fail because it was sitting way at the end of Harvard's campus in Alston. For those of you that have been to Cambridge, it's over the river across Harvard Square. And what's so wonderful about this was that it became a proof of concept, and the entire Alston innovation ecosystem is being built because of this was successful. I was told that Harvard students would not go more than 4 minutes from their dorm to a class or anything. And a lot of these students say that they love that it's a little bit out of the way. They pack their backpack and they come and they stay and they feel a much stronger sense of community than if they just kind of popped in and out. So what is the iLab? We have 30,000 square feet of space, open co-working space, conference rooms. It looks like many innovation spaces that I'm sure many of you have seen. We have open JC and AR, VR lab because we think augmented and virtual reality is the next processing platform as well. We keep continuing to resource them as the demands increase. We're opening up a podcast studio. We have a maker space that keeps expanding. But the really important thing about what we do for students at the iLab is the educational mission. Again, not necessarily trying to turn every Harvard student into an entrepreneur, any stage, any school. And as anyone that comes from Harvard knows, we have to have a pedagogy. I am not academic at all, but I think this is a really wonderful way to think about what we do and how we do it. Foundational learning are the courses taught. Again, I mentioned class projects turning into ventures. It allows innovation to kind of happen organically, going seamlessly from the classroom to an entrepreneurial inspired innovation. The next idea is this idea of expert resourcing surrounding these programming and entrepreneurs with the experts that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. I talk about lowering the friction costs, giving them access to the people that will contribute to their success, helping them build those networks very early on in the process. So you have the relationships with the investors long before you're looking to raise money. So it really helps to further their ideas. The third one, which I would argue might be the most important one, if there wasn't most important, which is experiential learning. Again, this idea of encouraging learning by doing. You don't have to have an idea, you don't have to have a team, but what we want to do is create the circumstances by which those ideas and the solutions can be formulated. We do that through things like our President's Innovation Challenge, solving the world's biggest problems, coming together, submitting a proposal. We have all sorts of programming along the way for team formation to happen. We also have startup weekends, hackathons, all of those traditional types of things that can help with that ideation process. And then finally, we have what we call venture incubation. This is our version of an accelerator program, and it's for students who have a full, sorry, I went ahead of myself. It's a 12-week program for students who have a well-formed team, a well-formed idea, an identified market opportunity, want to take it to the next level. Again, we're not picking winners. I'm not putting my investor hat on and only picking those that are going to have a financial success. We're really selecting them based on stage of development. But the real thing that we're trying to do with all of this is meeting students wherever they are in their journey, making sure that there's multiple entry points. The next one is the Launch Lab. Again, this came out, as I mentioned, out of this personal pain point of having to kick them out upon graduation, wanting to continue to help them. 5 minutes, oh my God, I see what you're saying. I usually can do this in 20 minutes. Anyway, it's a curated community of like-minded, similarly staged entrepreneurs. Again, continuing that cross-disciplinary approach, that peer-to-peer learning. The Life Lab is our life sciences workspace. This is incredibly crucial, I believe, in getting all of these amazingly important ideas to market, that students, alumni, and faculty, we're adding faculty into the mix here, have this fully permitted, equipped wet lab space where they can work on their ideas. Again, IP-free zone, they own all their own ideas. Harvard's not taking a stake in any of this. And we take the friction costs away from them. They focus on the science. We do everything else. It's been incredibly successful so far. And the why, I think to this audience is incredibly obvious. What we're trying to do is unlock that unrealized value around the university. One of the biggest failings I would have at running this is that if so many ideas never see the light of day. I still think 6 years in, we've only kind of captured the low-hanging fruit, and there's so many brilliant academics and scientists and researchers that would stay in the lab forever, and those ideas and those life-changing solutions to the world's problems may never get to the market, and it's my job to make sure that that happens. And as we know, this constant process of facilitating those connections and improving the capacity for people to solve the world's biggest problems so that this next generation of innovators that are the current students can really bring deep impact to the world. So, there we go. Questions? I did it. I wrapped it up.